Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our next installment of Walking in Their Shoes. These workshops where we simply seek to hear stories that are not often told and learn from perspectives that maybe are not our own. This month, we're looking at being Asian in America. Because in this last year, it's being reported that hate crimes against Asians have increased by a staggering 150%, which is mind-boggling. I read in New York City alone, it went from 3 in the previous year to 28 this last year, hate crimes against Asians. So something is going on, and we're simply seeking to hear stories, to seek to learn and understand, hopefully on a deeper level, from those who are experiencing this. Today, you will watch 4 interviews, and in these 4 interviews, by the end, hopefully we'll have a better idea of what the experience is like right now to be Asian in America. So thank you for tuning in. This is important work, and I'm grateful that you are taking the time to do it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Justin Ewan, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story with you all. And I really believe that sharing stories with one another is such an important part of getting to know each other and making the world a better place. In looking back, some of these stories relate to is the concept of color blindness. And, you know, as I've gone through life and different experiences, I've had to learn and adapt and change how I've kind of approached how I felt about that concept of color blindness. I think in some ways it had a lot of promise about treating or seeing people as equals. On the other hand, I think it also may have led to stereotypes and also a lack of understanding of and ability to share one's story before being put into a box or lumped in with other people that you may not have had the same experience with. When I was in 3rd grade and went through the rite of passage, that is a McDonald's Play Place birthday party that a friend was holding in the playground area there. Unfortunately, had an experience that made me realize that, you know, I'm different. And so another kid who was not at the party called me a chink, and friends stood up for me as much as they could at that age. And it really made me realize that, you know, the ideals of colorblindness, you know, did not exist. It made me acutely aware that I was going to be perceived as something different, something foreign, and, you know, would make it hard to fit in. So naturally, what did I do? Tried to fit in. And I think the next stage of childhood resulted in me looking in the mirror one day in high school and thinking to myself, when I look in the mirror, I think I'm white. And so not fully seeing that person looking back in the mirror with my own Asian American identity. And it really started me thinking about how to explore and come to grips with both fitting in and also understanding my own identity. One of the summers during college, I had the chance to visit Roanoke, Virginia, and heading over to the Piggly Wiggly, was able to talk to some of the folks who were working in the cash register area, and they were extolling the virtues of the wonderful town and mentioned the mountains that were within the city limits, and then asked me about, well, you know, made a comment, you probably have big mountains in the country you come from too. And another experience while I was there, I went to kind of a country fair, county fair type event, and ordered from a vendor a chicken dish, and before handing it to me, kind of pulled their hand back and said, "Oh, before I give this to you, can you tell me how to say chicken in your own language?" So although it was unexpected, or hadn't had comments like that, made around me. I felt like it, through my experience, was better able to cope with the feelings, kind of the knee-jerk reactions of feeling like a foreigner, and being perceived as someone who wasn't born in the U.S. And in my case, I was born in the U.S. And so, it really allowed me to, take a step back and to reflect on, perhaps, people not come across people who are Asian American before there. And so that was their, perception. And so to kind of extend a little bit of patience, from my end as I process those emotions. It bottled up into all that is what Asian Americans go through in terms of, for example, in my case, parents who came over, immigrated from, in their case, Hong Kong to go to college in the U.S. And, challenges feeling that because my Chinese language ability was not up to par, or my knowledge of customs, that they might want me to be a part of, I wasn't as well, I didn't embrace as much. And so I think wrapped up in all of that are those complex feelings that some Asian Americans can feel caught between the country that of their family origin and the country that they're living in. Related to that, a lesson that I learned after moving to Amsterdam, had the opportunity to work at Nike's European headquarters there, saw a group of Chinese Dutch kids hanging out together in one of the town squares. And initially, when I saw them speaking Dutch to one another, and my perception was, wow, that's so weird. Like, look, they're speaking Dutch, and they're of Chinese background. And it was this big whoa moment to say that knee-jerk reaction is what others might see when they see me speaking American English in the U.S. And so it really kind of drove home to me that I need to keep learning. I also need to check what biases or stereotypes I might have or have internalized. And so it was a real kind of wake up moment to say, I am not perfect and no one else is perfect. When I moved back to Oregon after being in Amsterdam, had the wonderful, opportunity and experience to become a dad. Wife Katrina and I have two great kids, Melina and Lucas, and through that experience, had another perspective of being parents and helping them navigate being Asian American. A number of years ago, we were at a museum out in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge area of Oregon, and the tour guide, was pointing out a bald eagle that they had at the museum, and turned to us as a family and asked us what was the national bird from the country we came from. And to add insult to injury in terms of of the family not feeling like we belonged, a woman, when we were momentarily stunned, another woman in the group walked closer to us and spoke kind of slowly and loudly, and with the assumption that we didn't speak English, repeating the question loudly and slowly to our family's face. And that was definitely something that the kids at their younger age at that time needed some time to process and for us to talk through. So I think really how we all can move forward together and reflecting on all these stories as I've been talking through these with you all, and thank you so much for listening, that the color blindness concept really, I think the ideals of how I would better describe how I would love to be viewed is that, yes, I think we all want to be viewed upon as human beings and not, with, racism or stereotypes or discrimination, that we consider one another, equals and all of that, but also the opportunity to share with each other the stories of our experiences, where we come from, because we are, have so many, we have so many differences in that respect. So balancing the two, meeting everyone where they're at, understanding and learning, hearing where they come from, and moving forward together and embracing all that is unique about our experiences and finding common ground to help make the world a better place. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story today.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're watching this interview. Pastor David, and this is Paul Lux, who is so gracious to meet with us and to have a conversation just about some of her own experiences as we continue to hear stories. And so, Pa, you were just sharing with me a little bit about your family story.
I mean, we moved from St. Paul, Minnesota,
Okay.
Where my dad's family are. I mean, he has tons of families up there. And that's where we were for about 6 years. And then we came to North Carolina. We're actually in Morganton.
Okay.
But even then, I can hear like my parents talking about like just driving to like the local, I don't know, Food Lion. I remember like Food Lion's been around forever. And I remember going there and, the kids, I have 3 sisters and a brother, we all in the car. And sometimes people would just honk at us and just tell us to go back to our country.
Oh.
And so, that is an experience.
Yeah, and so as a young child, just with your family in the car and having that happen, what does that do to how you view yourself, your identity, especially in those formative years?
It really made me question the big question is, why are we here? Like, I mean, we're not wanted. Why are we here? And the other thing is safety. I mean, are we safe here?
Sure.
And no one's like ever come up to our faces when I was with my parents. But then growing up, that was Morganton, and we only lived there for a little bit, about a couple of years, and then we moved to Hickory, and I was like in the 6th grade, and I went to a middle school in Hickory. And although, a lot of the teachers were really, really nice, all the teachers I've had were nice, and I had a lot of nice friends, but there was this one boy, and I remember in the 6th grade, and we're in the library. And we're doing our own work, and the teacher wasn't like close to me or him, but we're doing something, and he just like, and I can't remember his name, but I remember what he said. He said, he just looked at me and said, "Your grandfather killed my grandfather." He just kept saying it and saying it. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Your grandfather killed my grandfather." And so I was thinking, no, he didn't. I mean, I was in the 6th grade. And so anyways, he just wouldn't stop. And I just started crying. Like, I remember, I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." And then the teacher asked me, like, "What's wrong?" And so I told them what happened, but, and he got in trouble.
Yes.
But still, to me, I didn't know. It wasn't until later that I realized why he had said that. It was during the Vietnam War. But see, I had no idea. So I know that his parents or someone close to him, that's what they were telling him about Asians.
Yes. And he saw you and thought, okay, you look different than me. You could be Vietnamese. And so I'm almost harboring anger against you as a representative of that person in my mind that took away something I love. Talking with you earlier, we've been talking about some of the Asian hate that has bubbled up this past year, and thank goodness you have said you didn't experience any firsthand. But why do you think that this has become such an issue in the last year or so?
I don't know. I really thought that things were getting better. They work hard. Many of them work hard. And many of them, like the generation before me, worked in really manual labor companies like my parents. A lot of us are successful,
Sure.
because we work hard to get where we are.
Yes.
And so, there's lots of Asians with businesses. And I just think that's part of it, because they have their own business and they work hard. And even in the schools and even in academics and education, they work hard. And it's just that, they're just unsure. They're just unsure of who we are and what our agenda is.
Yes.
And then again, sometimes I think too that it's like a scapegoat to everything, like the pandemic. So I just think that's part of the reason. I mean, sometimes people have to blame somebody. If you look through, like they blame the Jews for everything that was bad back then.
Sure.
So I think sometimes, unfortunately, certain groups of people, certain groups of race become like a scapegoat for things that people have no explanation for.
So since the pandemic just happened to originate in China, and not only the Chinese, but anyone who could look Chinese, anyone who's Asian might be scapegoated to say, oh, you're somehow responsible for what happened. Right, that you are you. You don't represent some stereotype that can all be thrown into, one grouping. You are unique. Right. You just are you.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any ideas of how a church could help, move this conversation forward to hopefully a better place in this country?
Well, I think, your church just, standing up and just doing what we're doing. Like, let's give people a chance. If you don't know, then try to get to know them before you make any kind of judgment.
Yes.
I think just advocating that everyone's different and just, just being the Christian that you guys are, what everything that Christians stand for is that get to know your neighbor, love your neighbor, and see them for who they are, and stop seeing them for the color or how they dressed or whatever stereotype you have going on for you. And that not your mom or your dad isn't always right. I mean, see for yourself, like we've got a chance to really change the world. And I really think that as people, we have to start with ourselves. Yeah. So, as a congregation, you go out there and you be the leader and you be that person to, make that change. And I just feel like part of it is it starts with us. So if I go and I treat somebody right, it's going to start with me. It's going to start with you and your whole congregation. I think that you guys doing this is and getting the conversation going lets everyone see that this is important. We have to treat everybody. We have to give everybody a chance. We have to treat everybody with love. Yes. Just like Jesus or God would.
That's wonderful. I think so too. So thank you so much for taking the time and
you're welcome.
And your story. It's powerful, it's important, and you're right. We need to do more of this. So thank you.
Yeah, and just stand up. I would say just stand up. If you see someone, say things that are not very nice to someone else, you don't have to address that person that's being mean, but you can sure support that person that's receiving it, because not all of us feel brave enough to look that mean person in the eye and say, you know what, we're ready to fight, for that other person. But I think what we can do is let the other person know, hey, I hear you, he's not right, and it doesn't matter, I'm here and I don't care what he says. So be that support.
And what struck me is that, you still remember back even from 6th grade comments. And so, those stick with us.
They stick with us for a long time.
And it would stick with us if then someone came beside you in that moment too and said, hey, I support you. I'm here for you. At any age, that's so important to do. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, welcome to our next video in this workshop series, as we're going beyond the walking in their shoes. I am here with a child of the church, Evan, who grew up here. When did you first start coming to Unity?
Since I was a baby.
And do you have any early memories of being here at church?
I remember, I think the first thing I remember was when we had Christmas in there. You had the big Christmas tree in the gathering.
Yeah. Oh, that is so fun. And you're now in college. Tell us where you're going and what you're majoring in.
I go to UNC Charlotte, and I am a senior. And I am majoring in multimedia design and creative writing.
That is wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for sitting down and talking with us a little bit today, doing these workshops. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. What are some of your hobbies, interests, anything like that?
Well, I obviously love church. And I think that growing up in church has made me have a strong faith, and I also love the outdoors and enjoying nature.
Okay, like hiking, kayaking.
So I was a Boy Scout here, and I am an Eagle Scout. So outdoors has always been something that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, so this whole experience is just about hearing other people's stories, and so we want to hear your stories. Particularly as an Asian in America right now. I know I've been just shocked at this last year. I read just today an article that said hate crimes against Asians have increased by 169%, which just baffles me. Do you have any idea why this is happening? And I guess the next question is it affecting you in any way?
I think the main thing is because of the coronavirus, that people think that when it came from China that it's their fault, and people get this hatred towards it because they're frustrated of what COVID has done to our lives, you know, and I feel like that most people just take their anger out because, we've been through so much, and, it's been such a long year that, it just builds up.
Yeah. So what was it like here in Denver? I know Denver is a very kind of Caucasian area, and you've been here since basically almost birth. What was that like for you to grow up as a minority in Denver?
I was talking to my dad that in North Lincoln that you have the percentages of race, and that the Asians, they didn't count as race because they didn't have the percentage. So
you weren't even a percentage.
Mm-hmm. So there's not as many Asians. I know growing up I'm a twin. Yeah. And there's also another set of twins that are from Vietnam. Okay. That we grew up with together, and I guess we were the only Asians that we knew of or associated with. Okay. And for the most part, I think that I never experienced prejudice or racism towards me. I think that for the most part, we were seen as, human and not for our skin color. Yeah. And I think that, now it's different when you grow up and people, you don't, as a child, you don't necessarily associate someone with the race. You just see them as who they are.
Just a fellow human being. Yeah.
And then when you grow up, you start to understand it more, and with society, now it's, you grow up and you learn the prejudice compared to back then, you grow up and you don't. So here, most of the people I grew up with, they didn't have that prejudice when they weren't taught that.
Yes. Do you have any ideas of how a church like Unity could respond in a positive way?
I mean, there are things, you can do, but I think that it starts with, with yourself and in the community. And then, because, everyone, I would hope, would want the idea to, help change the world, that type of idea. Yeah. But I think that everything, you have to look at yourself and go through life, just your day-to-day life, and truly, before, when you do things, think about what you're doing. Especially with COVID, everyone has gone through some struggle, and to be able to understand what your struggle is and know that, you know, it was a hard struggle or whatever you went through. Understand that you're not the only person that went through a struggle, whether it be something similar or something less or worse.
Yeah.
To have that common ground of saying, you know, I went through this, and you know, it was hard, but this person also went through something, so that knowing that, you know, you have that common ground.
Well, good. So as a church, as we're studying these topics, is there anything else that you'd want to say that you think would just be helpful for us in this journey?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, in this world that is happening, but I think taking it, you know, one step at a time is the main thing, because you can't just, you know, jump to that one goal, the ultimate goal of, you know, peace and everything. You have to take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
So I think being able to go day to day and just reflect on, you know, what you've been through and how you can improve it.
So we can't fix everything at once.
No,
But
exactly.
maybe this is taking a step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your willingness to share your story, and particularly with the church who has known you for so many years. So thank you very much.
We're here today with Jeanette Pai Espinoza, president of National Crittenton Foundation. And we've asked Jeanette to speak to us and tell us a little bit about her upbringing and her history. Jeanette?
My ancestry is Korean, and I am the first child on both sides of my family to be born in the United States shortly after the Korean War. So my parents immigrated here from Korea about 1955, and I was born in 57. My ancestry, my lineage is very much tied to the Presbyterian Church. My grandfather, Minsu Pai, was one of the first Protestant ministers in South Korea. He actually went to divinity school in the United States, and following in his tradition as sort of a social justice revolutionary in Korea, both of my parents were also on the boards of the Princeton and the McCormick Seminary, and so as we like to joke, we're Big P Presbyterian. But my grandfather and my great-grandfather on my father's side both fought for the liberation of the Korean people, both against the Chinese and the Japanese. My great-grandfather was actually executed in Korea by the Japanese for his activities in organizing in rural parts of the community. So that's my history. I'm very connected to it. I actually grew up I was born in New Jersey. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and also in Kansas, where I was really nested in a strong Korean community, but lived in very, very white communities. In Missouri, sort of rural, and then in Kansas, suburban. So I really struggled. I struggled a lot growing up with being an Asian person in a predominantly white environment, really without any other people of color. My graduating class, I graduated from Shawnee Mission South in Kansas, and my graduating class was 800, and there were, I think, 5 students of color, including me, in that graduating class. So I struggled a lot to find my place in the world. It was difficult.
That's quite a rich history that you have, Jeanette. Can you tell me a little bit about how that history has kind of shaped where you are today in your career?
Sure. I mean, I think just experiencing sort of invisibility and isolation as a young Asian girl, young woman, and then woman, plus my family history, right, of activism really pushed me into the work I do now, which is national advocacy for cis and trans young women and gender expansive young people, to really sort of fight against the marginalization and the oppression on a larger scale than what I experienced. But I certainly experienced living under the sort of stereotypes about Asian women as submissive on the one hand, also over-sexualized and fetishized, that's a hard word to say, and which continues today, being perceived as a foreigner, never feeling like I I would ever be perceived as an American, which is true to this day. Um, and I think, I'm 64 now, so I can look retrospectively, but I think that struggle for place and belonging pushed me as a young person, as a teenager, to be involved in, drugs, drinking, early sexual activity. I stole a couple cars, really, for lack of figuring out where did I belong, because I wasn't really Korean enough to be deeply embedded in that Korean community, but I also clearly was not, I wasn't a white person. And I think at that age just struggled to figure out what I could adapt of my Korean culture and what I could adapt about being in this United States. Was a struggle. And it was a struggle for my parents. They were both immigrants. They were in their late 20s when they immigrated. They did both speak English, so I had that benefit. They both attended college. But it was a struggle, and it was a struggle that I see in the young folks that we work with today. It is. I think you see, as of late, the anti-Asian hate increases in that, and the demonization of the Chinese as being the causes of COVID. And I think what it says to me is that things have not changed as much as we would hope they would. And so we continue the work, working in alliance with other communities of color to create some justice and make some change. I wouldn't change. I wouldn't trade being a Korean American for anything. My kids are pretty deeply rooted in it too. But it has been a struggle.
Wow, Jeanette, you are such a phenomenal professional. If you could leave our audience with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Well, one piece of advice. I think my advice would be really clear about what your core values are and don't deviate from them. I think that's what's guided me through all the trouble I've gotten into, to my work, my education, my being a parent, is figure out what your true north is and stick to it.
Well, now that you've watched the videos, I want to say thank you and then invite you to one of our opportunities to discuss what you just saw. This discussion will be an important time to say, okay, what does the church do next? Now that we've heard these stories, now that we know a little bit about what is happening, what is the role of the church moving forward? So please join us in those discussions.